Good evening, welcome to February's meeting of the Planning Applications Committee. Just a few announcements from me to start with. We don't yet know when the COVID situation and face-to-face meetings are going to come back, but just so officers, members of the public and members of the committee can plan, March and April's meetings certainly will continue to be run on Zoom. So even if by the end of April we are allowed, we'll do the next two by Zoom and keep that under review, obviously, going forward. Tonight's agenda, there are 6 applications in front of us, numbered on your agenda 5 through to 10. The only one that doesn't have a speaker is number 7. So I'm suggesting, well, we will take the items in order, except number 7 will move to the end. So it'll be 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, and then 7. That will be the order we do things in. On each application, just to run through this for members of the public or people who haven't been here before, first we will hear from objectors, either one objector for 3 minutes or 2 objectors for 3 minutes each. Then we hear from the agent of the applicant, who will get the same amount of time. So 3 minutes if it's been 1 objector, but they will get 6 minutes if there have been 2 objectors. Then we'll hear from any councillors, not on this committee, but ward councillors who want to speak on issues in front of us. And then we'll move to questions of clarification from the members of the committee, and then a discussion from the members of the committee, and then the vote. And then we'll move on to the next item. So the agenda for tonight, 1, I assume there aren't any because all 10 members are here, but apologies for absence. I'm assuming none. Item 2, declaration of pecuniary interest. Anyone could show if they need to make any? Nope. Happy with that. 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Are they agreed? Yep, not seeing any shaking heads. Good. Agenda item number 4 is the planning applications. And as I said, we'll do them in order except for number 7. So the first one is agenda item 5, which is 94 the Broadway in Trinity Ward. And I invite the officer to share his screen and explain this one for us.
Thank you, Chair. Bear with me a second, just going to get the plans up. Hopefully you can all see that. Members, the application site is located at 94 the Broadway in Wimbledon Town Centre. It's currently a mid-terrace building with commercial at ground floor, with a residential unit above. This is a 3D visual just showing the front of the building. The application itself is for a rear extension to the building, including internal alterations at 1st and 2nd floor level, to create 4 new residential units, 3 1-bed units and 1 2-bedroom unit. Talking you through the plans, so a 3D visual at the rear. So this is what's proposed here. The extension would take the form of facing brick with a simple single ridge roof structure in its design, slightly offset from the existing single roof structure for the main part of the building at the back. Flats would be accommodated within this part of the building and also in the main part of the building as well. So looking to the plans, this is the proposed ground floor plan. The commercial unit at the front would remain a rear access through. So the proposed unit at the back here would be split level over 2 floors, where you have a very small private outdoor space with cycle storage and bin storage for the remainder of the units. Moving up to 1st floor level, so that unit would be split level with 2 bedrooms at 1st floor. Turning to the existing main part of the building, that will be converted to 1-bed flat here. And then further up, 2nd floor, again, a 1-bed flat in the main part of the building, and then another split level unit at the rear. So living accommodation there, and then a single bedroom within the roof space. And there is a proposed roof plan showing the scheme. I do have further beyond in the slides a 3D visual of the previously refused application you'll see in the agenda, which came out right to the edge of the plot and full width. So this scheme has been stepped in and reduced in depth. Section drawings of the scheme. Elevations. So at the front, nothing really changes at the front. You'll see at the back the proposed ridge height is not higher than the ridge of the front of the building, so it would not come up above the building from the Broadway. Some rear balconies proposed for those units at the back there. Turning to the side elevations, that's the extension here, and then from the other side, site photographs. So at the back of these terraces, as you can see, extensions over time, given its commercial nature, have happened. This is the site here, so this would be removed, this flat roof section, and extension coming out here. Neighbouring properties looking to the left, so extensions have been approved some years ago further down, which have been implemented. You'll note in the agenda there's a 2015 application which is still extant. It expires in November 2021 for extensions at the back here, although that has not been implemented. It's looking at the back here further down, so some extensions have happened here. There's the application site here. So there's a small access yard at the back. Opposite is this commercial building here. So here, and the site on the left. And as I mentioned earlier, this is just a useful 3D visual of the previously refused scheme, which is that, showing it adjacent to the adjacent approval, which is still extant but not implemented. So that's just for useful reference during the discussion. Overall, Chair, Officer satisfied the application can be granted and provides 4 reasonable size units within a town centre location. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we move to the objectors. I've got 2 listed. I'll take them in order on my list. First one, Katerina Pavlos. Is that right? Yes. If you can unmute, and you all have 3 minutes.
Good evening, councillors. My name is Katerina Pavlos. My family have been resident at number 92 the Broadway as both business owners and residential occupiers for 40 years. We are strongly opposing the planning application on the basis that the current plans would cause substantial damage to our amenity and personal lives by severely obstructing our natural light and right to enjoy our own property. My husband and I have 3 children under the age of 5 and also care for our 80-year-old mother who is disabled and has dementia. She spends most of her time in our upstairs rear kitchen living room, which has a window facing Cobden Mews and the offices opposite. The proposed extension of the wall at the back of 94 will reduce the amount of light that enters our residence immensely, particularly in this room and our back bathroom. Over 35% of our daily light will be lost. According to the Building Research Establishment Site Layout Planning for Daylight and Sunlight, a right to light is infringed when the light received by a property reduces to below sufficient levels after a development was erected, which would indeed be the case here, and this is not legal. We have worked and lived in Wimbledon for 4 decades, giving more to the local community than many of us could give over a lifetime. Our kitchen is the heart of our home, and every day my mother looks out of the window to look for her husband who passed away suddenly last year. Her view to the right will be completely obliterated by a concrete wall, cutting out a vast amount of light and forcing us to use far more electricity. This will be hugely detrimental to our well-being and our absolute right to enjoy our property, forcing our mother to spend most of her days, particularly in the winter, not only in a prison of her mind, but in a darkened cell. This is completely immoral. We would also like to point out that despite the alterations to the initial planning application, the proposed works are absolutely not in keeping with our property, which it is joined to.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you, and would harm the overall look and character of the site. The current planning proposal of number 94 is overbearing and oppressive and needs to be rethought. Our legal right to light and enjoyment of our home are basic human necessities that should not be ignored. Permitting such an unsustainable application can only serve to diminish the quality of our local site as a whole and bring with it unnecessary personal heartache to 3 generations of a family who have resided for so long in the heart of Wimbledon. We urge you not to approve this application as it stands. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that. Our second speaker on this one is Wasim Butt.
Am I on?
Yes.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and honourable members. My name is Wasim Butt and I'm the owner of 2 Cobden Mews, and I have now been there for over 15 years. The developers of 94 are relying on the fact that numbers 96 and 98 have been granted planning permission to go out as far as the boundary wall on Cobden Mews. If it were not for this fact, they would probably have proposed plans keeping in line with the surrounding buildings. They would not have proposed such a huge, overbearing, invasive and visually out of character building. They would not have proposed a structure which would end up creating a tower block of bricks, irrespective of them being of acceptable color, nature or make. They would have ensured that this development would have conserved and enhanced Merton's heritage, and this current proposal would not have been in contradiction to Merton Council's own stated policies, which are DMD2, DMD3 and CS14. The consequences of allowing this development will mean there is an increase in non-family type footfall. There will be, as already currently being experienced, the antisocial and drug dealing behavior by the increase in tenancies in the other properties, as can be evidenced by the countless reports made to the police. Also, the issue of parking and the threats faced by owners who own land which have parking facilities. This development will result in 5 single units and a loss of another existing 4-bed family-sized property without even an adequate replacement of at least one at a minimum of a 3-bed property. This proposed development would thus be in stark contrast to Merton's strategic stated policy DMT1, DMT3, CS20, and CS14. The increase in footfall of non-family type occupancy would increase this kind of antisocial behavior. Unless Merton Council can solve this issue in line with its stated policy DMD2 of safeguarding its local resident taxpayers, I strongly object to increasing the current occupancy from family-orientated to short-term lets of fly-tipping shifting strangers. I do not believe Merton Council can ignore its own stated policies, which leads me to believe it is only the precedents set by numbers 96, 98, which would allow this proposal to go ahead. For the record, I have asked Council to look into the fact that when 96, 98 applied for planning, they misled the Council and did not declare there was an established business, Focus the Barbers, already there for over 50 years, with a lease of around 10 years still to run, which is more than the minimum 7 years as stated in a planning application. That, I believe, should lead to the planning approval being rescinded, in which case there is no precedence, and thus this application be judged as a standalone on its own merit, which is in stark contrast, as already clearly pointed out above, to Merton's own stated policies. Finally, to reiterate, I strongly object to this development being given approval in its current format. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from James Cohen of the agent.
Thank you, Chair. My name is James Cohen and I'm the planning agent for this application. As outlined by the supporting officer, this proposal seeks the erection of a 4-storey rear extension to provide 4 high-quality, self-contained residential dwellings. the completed development will consist of a 2-bedroom unit with individual access from Printer's Yard located across the ground and first floor. The remaining 3 units will be accessed from the Broadway. These 3 units, located across the 2nd, 3rd and 4th floor, are 1-bedroom, 2-person flats. All units will exceed the minimum space standards, and all habitable rooms are provided with well-sized windows. The key planning considerations are in regard to the principle of development, neighbouring amenity, transport, and the impact on character and appearance. In discussing these points, I would like to briefly address some of the neighbouring objections to assure members that this development will not be a harmful addition to the area. Due to increased housing pressures in London, it is encouraged in both the London Plan and Merton's local plan to use previously developed land effectively to increase the supply of housing for local residents. And as such, rearward extensions of this nature can be very efficient in achieving additional homes, provided that they are appropriately designed and located. Printer's Yard, the road behind the application site, is characterised by rearward extensions and self-contained flats. This form of development intensifies towards the east, with the rear area of some neighbouring properties containing up to 8 self-contained units. As such, the principle of residential use and the provision of several dwellings at this site is deemed to be in keeping with the character of the area and in accordance with Policy CS14. The site sits within Wimbledon's designated town centre and is therefore in close proximity to several local services and amenities which residents can benefit from. As outlined in the supporting officer's report, it is felt that this location is more appropriate for the provision of 1- and 2-bedroom sized units. The existing property contains 4 bedrooms but has proved unmarketable for family accommodation. The site sits above a commercial premises, is located on a busy road, in a town centre, and does not currently have any access to private external amenity. This is considered to strengthen the principle of the proposed development at this site. Whilst more intense forms of rearward extension can be found further to the east of the site, such as the extensions at number 100 the Broadway, this proposal recognises that alterations and extensions are less substantial towards the west, and as such responds to its direct surroundings. Unlike development and planning approvals further eastward, this proposal has not utilised the full depth and width available. This is partially to ensure a development that is in keeping with the scale and character of the surrounding area, but also to ensure the protection of neighbouring amenity. This development recognises the existing residents to either side of the property and has been designed to avoid unjust impact on the amenity levels that they benefit from. The rear elevation of the proposal will extend beyond the rear elevation of the directly adjoining neighbour at number 92 by just 2 metres. The submitted plans display a 45-degree line from the centre of the neighbouring property's window in order to demonstrate that their outlook will not be diminished as a result of this development. Concern for daylight and sunlight levels from the residents of number 96 have also been expressed. The massing of the proposed extensions are clearly positioned away from the windows at 96. In addition, number 96 benefits from planning permission for significantly larger rearward extensions, which are still valid and could be constructed. Some additional concern was raised by objectors in relation to the loss of light for the properties on South Park Road. It should be clarified that this road sits at significant distance from the site, and a large 3-storey commercial premises known as Fine Lining Associates sits in between the site and the properties on South Park Road. Further objection has been raised in relation to the increased footfall and traffic along Printer's Yard. It should be clarified that only one of the proposed units will be accessed via Printer's Yard. The other proposed dwellings are accessed from the front of the site on the Broadway, which is already a busy strategic road. Furthermore, the applicant has confirmed agreement to a Section 106 process, which will restrict new residents from obtaining resident parking permits. As the current unit benefits from this provision, it is likely that both footfall and traffic levels will be decreased as a result of this development. Concern was expressed in relation to the potential noise and disturbance from the proposed balcony areas. As the proposed units have a maximum occupancy of 2 individuals, it's unlikely that disturbance will be caused. It should also be noted that the adjoining site benefits from planning approval for the installation of several balconies. Dedicated enclosed refuse storage has been provided by the entrance of the units.
1 minute
Thank you. Refuse has been provided in accordance to Merton Council's guidance. It should be noted that ownership and maintenance concerns regarding Printer's Yard do not hold relevance to this planning application. In conclusion, this proposal presents a well-considered and appropriate extension scheme. The finished development will provide much-needed additional housing with a provision of dwelling sizes that are truly appropriate for the demands of the surrounding community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tim, Bryson, is there anything specific in those presentations you wanted to come back on?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think what might assist, Chair, if I demonstrate with the plans, just very quickly on residential amenity and the scheme. So this is the rear of the site here. So number 92 is on this side, and number 96 this side. The proposal does abut the wall of 92 this side, and it does go beyond this rear elevation of 92 by 2.1 meters on plan, and this side it has been stepped in comparison to the previously refused scheme. It also reduced in depth. So in terms of residential amenity, as you can see, there's a variety of interaction and extensions that have happened over time to the rear of these units. And in terms of Compton Mews, is the commercial unit opposite at the back. You can just see the site here, and as I said, 2.1 meters beyond there. And officers consider that relationship to the commercial units to be acceptable. And the height, it's not going higher than the existing ridge height of the existing building, which is there. So I hope that provides some useful assistance to members.
Thank you. Okay, members' questions of clarification to the officers. I see David Dean, then Councillor Dean, then Councillor Christie.
I've got 2 or 3 questions, and they depend on the first question. Who owns the road outside this application?
Thank you. In terms of road ownership, I don't believe it's an adopted highway. I know that the waste officer's comments on the application were quite useful in this, because she's referred to issues with bin storage bin access down the access way. But unfortunately, I can't confirm whether or not there is a adopted public highway. But I do know, according to that representation, that Viola do go down there to serve the properties at the back there.
Okay, Councillor Dean, you have 2 more brief, hopefully.
So the key thing is basically waste management will be by the council, picking up the bins which are going to be based on the development itself. That's what we're saying. The question is the objector's view on daylight and sunlight and saying they're illegal. What's your point of view on that?
The right to light legislation, so that is not a material planning consideration in terms of that process. We have to make a judgment of the plans and where the windows are. But in terms of that process of right to light legislation, that is something held separately outside of planning. And that essentially is a civil matter should someone wish to go down that route.
Okay, and just one last statement, really, in terms of, so in this applicant at the moment could put their bins on the unadopted highways if they wished, potentially, couldn't they? That would be my last question.
Potentially, yes.
Okay, Councillor Christie, Billy.
Thank you, Chair. I was actually going to ask about the speaker who mentioned that the amenity and the daylight allowed into their property would, the impact would be illegal. You suggest that it's not a planning consideration, but could I ask the impact on the amenity and the daylight? How does that compare to what the sort of the legislation outlines?
Well, the applicants with this application they've not submitted a daylight sunlight study in terms of analytical analysis for that. But I wonder if I can just share the screen very quickly again, Chair. So number 92 is here, and so you can see the extension proposed goes beyond circa 2.1 meters. So although it will be a presence, it is much reduced from the previous scheme, which went right out to the edge of the red line plot. So in terms of that relationship, facing north, it's within the town centre. We consider that to be acceptable, and that's the judge how we come to that judgment. You'll note from the previous refusal, we did object on impact on neighbouring community because it went far deep. There is a extant permission next door, but that hasn't been implemented, so it only gets limited weight in our assessment. But that's over here. So that's how we've come to that view.
So there has been no assessment on the actual assessment on the daylight sunlight impact.
As far as I can see, the applicants, they haven't submitted a daylight sunlight assessment just in support of the application. No.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any. Oh, yes, I am now. Councillors, first Alan Breaches and then Crow. Stephen.
Thank you. Thank you. Tim, on page 12, 7.3, you acknowledge that there will be some increased sense of enclosure. Could you just talk us?
Yes, so that was in relation to the plan I just shown on screen. So it was really about here, and this relationship here. So that's in relation to number 92.
And is that a planning issue, sense of enclosure, a sense of being enclosed in from next door?
Yes, it's sort of an expression, well, enclosure or overbearing. So it's it's sort of, yes, that is a consideration, but it depends on the circumstances in which it is. Yeah. So here it's views from a window next door. In terms of a sense of enclosure, that's how that's what we're referring to on page 12.
Okay, just two more points from me, Chair. Mrs. Pilalis talked about the kitchen being the heart of every home, and I'm sure we all agree that. And this building application abuts 2.1 meters out. In fact, it's next to the flue, which is quite a wide flue. Cannot the applicant stop their expansion up to just beyond the flue rather than 2.1 meters? Because there's some leeway there with this gigantic flue. Obviously downstairs I know is stage door is the restaurant. So the 2.1 meters is, and the lack of a daylight assessment, isn't this something we can ask to be looked at?
Okay, on that, sorry, before we go into, I mean, the decision we have to make tonight is to pass or refuse the application as it stands, or defer. So in order for that to happen, we would either have to defer to a future meeting or refuse it and have the applicant come back with a new application. I'm not sure, well, it'll up to the committee to decide on that. Tim?
Yes, Chair. Yes, the plans before us have to be looked at and determined. So it can't be conditioned, obviously, to be reduced in size, something like that. So either approve, refuse, or defer for this evening.
Okay, I think we had Councillor Crowe next. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions, please. The first is I'd like a bit of guidance on the weighting we should give to policy DMD2A5, which says ensure provision of appropriate levels of sunlight and daylight to both proposed and adjoining buildings. So what weighting should we give that in our considerations, please? And my second question is, should the applicant have submitted a daylight assessment in respect of number 92? It strikes me that maybe they should have.
Okay, Tim.
In terms of the DMD2 policy, yes, that is our adopted policy that we use. So yes, so full weight can be given to that. That forms part of the sort of criteria of looking at amenity within that policy. So yes, you can clearly give weight to that. What I will say is this it is north facing, this section at the back. So in terms of sunlight effects, will be fairly limited. And in terms of daylight sunlight report, I mean the applicant hasn't submitted a daylight sunlight report in support of that of his application. We've come to the judgment we've come to based on the site circumstances and the previously refused scheme in terms of reductions, and also bearing in mind some of the schemes that have been granted permission over the years. At the back there, you saw that extension further down. There's obviously the 2015 application which hasn't been implemented next door. So a balanced judgment has to be come to on that.
As I can't see any more questions, comments. Councillor Dean, David.
I think I think councillors have asked the obvious questions, and I do accept that officers need to think about increasing housing stock, and I do clearly agree with the applicant that trying to sell a 4-bedroom flat there has been very difficult. It's not the kind of thing that would work. But in terms of what Councillor Crowe has said and Councillor Allen British about DMD2 and sunlight, and also Councillor Christie, I don't quite see, I mean, this is a very, very tight area, extremely tight. And I don't quite see how this is fair on the neighbour. And also, I'm not convinced that the bins wouldn't end up on that extremely narrow road, because they're going to have to be put out. And I don't see how the lorries can get past to get to the bins to put them out, because the lorry will have to go past the property completely and then get the bins out and then put them in and then come back again. And I think that's just too tight. Clearly, if the applicant is rejected tonight and they came back with something shorter, their argument would be, we can't build 4 flats. And that's probably true. They'd have to build 2 or 3 over more than one level. But I'm certainly not comfortable with this. I think it's too tight. I think it's unfair on the neighbours. I don't think the waste collection can be done. And I agree with councillors in terms of sunlight is unreasonable. So I'm hoping somebody else will have some opinions that are similar and we can reject that.
Councillor Christie, then Southgate. Billy.
Thank you, Chair. I don't feel at this stage prepared to reject this application, but what I do feel that I would want is for an actual daylight sunlight assessment to be carried out and to be submitted, and for us to take a really informed view on that, given the comments from the speakers. So my preference would be to ask to defer this and to ask the applicant to submit that report, and so that we can take an informed view on whether how much of an impact this would have on the neighbouring amenity. So that's my view.
Thank you. I'll take that as a proposal that we vote on deferral. I did say Councillor Southgate, so Peter, do you have anything to add on that? You're on mute, Peter.
Let's try again. No, not on deferral.
Okay. If there are no other comments, I think I'll move to a vote on deferring for one meeting. We'll take it.
Chair, I made a proposal to object. You did? To reject. So that was the first thing. So I was waiting for other councillors to need a second for that.
And no other councillor agreed. It seems with the reject, but we had another proposal for a deferral. I'm going to say,
that's not the case.
Can we let me finish? I'm going to say we'll go for a vote on the deferral. If that falls, then we can go for a vote on rejection or passing it.
Chair, you need an objector, a proposer, and a seconder, and two councillors have got their hands up. All I'm asking is that all the councillors are answered first before you make that decision.
Right. It really doesn't make that much difference to the end argument which order we take the votes in. Do I have a seconder for Billy? Councillor Christie.
Happy to second. I'm very happy to second.
And Councillor Ironbreachers, I think, for that. Now, just specify on this, I think if it's possible to do the assessment of sunlight in quick enough time to bring this back to the next meeting, which I think is in 4 or 5 weeks' time, we would hopefully aim to do it for then. If it's going to take a bit longer, hopefully it'll be at the most a meeting after that, if we vote for deferral. So I'm going to take it to a vote now. All those in favour of deferring until the sunlight assessment is done. Show of hands, please. I'm seeing 7, I believe. All those against? And any not voting? I think I will be not voting as well. I make that 7-3, but it's clearly a majority in favour, so we don't need to do the Zoom vote on it. It's clearly decided in favour of deferring. So thank you for that one. We move on to agenda item 6. Which is Chapter Way in the Great Collier's Wood, and Jonathan Lewis is the officer who will introduce this one. Thank you.
Chair, I've been joined by my colleague Tim Lipscomb, who is the case officer, and I've been in communication with him at the outset of the meeting.
Chair, thank you. That will be me.
I understand that he's happy to present the case, so I'll leave it to Tim to present, but I'm here for answering questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Tim. Please share your screen.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, just sharing the screen now. Hopefully you'll be able to see that in a couple of moments. Oh, sorry. Bear with me. Difficulties, I'm afraid. this is the area of the site. Apologies, it's come through with this green cover over it, so you can't actually see the buildings here, but this is the historic core at Merton Abbey Mills and the more recent flatted buildings. And there's 2 buildings on site here, Vista House and Prospect House, which have a similar L shape to Independence House. Sorry, jumped a little quickly there. Here we can see a more detailed view of the site. Over here is Merton Abbey Mills, just to give you a grounding in terms of location. This application is a prior approval for an upwards extension onto a detached block of flats. It's a new type of prior approval application that the government has built in as part of the raft of the build agenda legislation. It may be that we see more applications like this coming to committee, but I believe this is the first one that the committee has dealt with. The introduction on page 36 sets out the legislative framework for this prior approval application and critically lists what issues can form material considerations. So we are limited to those areas in terms of the decision-making process. So moving back to the proposal, there's two standalone purpose-built blocks of flats, a maximum of 7 stories in height. Residential accommodation is provided above undercroft and external car parking. The buildings are red brick with grey metal windows, balconies, and panelling to the lift shafts. If I just take you through the drawings, the proposal is for a single-story upward extension, so 1 additional floor. It doesn't increase the overall height of the building because it's setting it next to the existing penthouses. Here, so it's on the L, the corner of the L of each of the buildings. So you can see 2 flats proposed here, flat 1 and flat 2. And then here we have them tucked into this area here. So this area already is at the same height, and these would be additional to those current rooftop flats. The exterior, in terms of the elevations, would be largely glazed. So you can see with the red lines around them, the proposed additional rooftop areas. So glazed with the detailing to match the existing. No off-street car parking is proposed. It is put forward as a car-free development. 24 additional car parking spaces are proposed, and additional bins would be provided within the existing bin stores, which are at ground floor level. Moving on to the key issues, page 46 starts with the transport and highway impacts. This is an area that we can assess the application on. Both the Highways Authority at Merton and the Transport Planner have raised no objection to the proposals on the basis that the additional traffic and parking demand would be minimal. Refuse arrangements would be acceptable, and there would be a significant over provision of cycle parking to serve both future occupants and the existing occupiers. It's noted a number of residents have raised concern over the poor condition of the private access road. And that is indeed the case. There's a number of areas where it's been patched up and it's not in a great condition. However, this is a private road not maintained by the council. It is part of the private access road across the site. So this is a civil matter between occupiers and the management company. It's not something that could reasonably be used to leave a refusal on this application, would be the position of officers. In terms of flood risk, and that's page 48, the arrangements are considered acceptable. Means of escape would be the same as for the existing flats, and as a rooftop flat itself, it's not particularly vulnerable. The external appearance of the extension is a key factor. That's page 49. In this case, it's going to be the impact on the adjacent conservation areas, and particularly the historic core of buildings at Merton Abbey Mills. Paragraph 7.7.6 concludes on this, that whilst these rooftop additions would be visible, they wouldn't be materially harmful due to the marginal effect when viewed from the adjacent conservation areas. So there will be additional bulk and massing, but that will be subsumed into that backdrop that these buildings currently create to Merton Abbey Mills. Moving on to natural light, and that's page 50. You'll see we conclude it is acceptable. It's not a dissimilar layout to some of the floors below in some ways, but ultimately the windows are sufficiently large to provide adequate light to these units. Impact on neighbours is at page 51. This is an area that has featured in the objection letters, and sympathy is held for the people in the rooftop units who currently enjoy a completely open aspect and outlook. The proposal results in similar relationships between flats that exist on site currently. So whilst there would be some limited loss of outlook for those living on the upper floors, the loss of views there could not form a material planning consideration. Whilst there is a limited impact on outlook, it's concluded that this wouldn't be sufficient to warrant a refusal, given that it replicates the existing arrangements. A number of occupiers feel that this is a breach of the original contract they entered into when buying a flat here. However, I'm afraid that's not a material planning consideration. We have to look at it in terms of the policies rather than going beyond that. Therefore, officers conclude that the proposal would be acceptable when assessed against these very specific factors that we can assess it against. It is of note that a number of the objections relate to fire safety, and you'll see that is covered in the report, in that the way the legislation is worded is that this cannot form a material consideration and would be dealt with at the building regulations stage. Notwithstanding that, the applicant has provided additional information on this in response to concerns raised in representation letters, and you'll see that in the mod sheet in detail. Ultimately, this will be dealt with at the building regulations stage of the development, and it's noted that the existing residents are currently having an issue with the existing cladding on the building. However, that wouldn't affect the consideration of this application, which would be assessed separately. Therefore, the recommendation is for approval, subject to conditions, including delivery and service plan and details of construction vehicles to minimise the construction impact. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Tim. We have the agent last, and then I've got 3 objectors listed to speak. We can only take 2 at maximum. I think we're just going to take the first 2 on my list, unless I'm advised otherwise. If you could stop sharing your screen, please, Tim. Lipscomb, that is.
Yes.
Thank you. So the first objector I have is Philip Kratz, and you will have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Sorry. Yes, we can.
Thank you. My name is Philip Kratz. I'm a specialist planning lawyer, and I've been appointed on behalf of a considerable number of the leaseholders whose homes are in these blocks of flats. And in that context, I want to speak to 2 matters. The first one is a technical matter, and then I want to speak about the merits of the case. As your case officer has explained, the leaseholders have had their own worries about the cladding over the last few months or couple of years, and added to that now is the concern about what is the novelty of this new procedure for permitted development rights. And that leads to the first technical issue. These new PD rights are summarised in 1.2 of the officer's report to the committee. That is a cut and paste from the GPDO, and these new rights apply only to development consisting of works for the construction of up to 2 additional stories of new dwellings immediately above the existing topmost residential story on a building, which is a purpose-built detached block of flats. Now, I'm on the Law Society's Planning Law Committee, and as part of the consultation process for this, all of the illustrations given were single, long, tall, thin blocks of flats. And the argument was given, well, what's another story or two on top of this? This isn't the case here. This is an architect-designed, purpose-built modern block of flats, skillfully designed, and again, as highlighted in your officer's report, to take account of the impact on the historic core of buildings at Merton Abbey Mills, and indeed the adjoining heritage assets. So firstly, this application is actually out with the scope of the permitted development. It is not a development on top of the existing topmost story. And the committee would be well advised to defer the application to take specific legal advice on that. In relation to the merits of the case, again, your officers have summarised it, but the external appearance of the building, as I've said, it was purpose designed by an architect who no doubt maxed out the amount of development available at the time it was designed and built. What is happening now is contributing towards a scale, massing and bulk of that building, which will have a less than substantial, but nonetheless impact, which is adverse on the adjoining heritage assets. That, coupled with the impact on the amenity of existing occupants of the building, means that the only possible conclusion for this would sensibly be a refusal. But that's assuming, of course, that you dignify the application with the ability to be processed under these PD rights. Thank you, Chairman and Committee.
Thank you. The next objector we have Aaron Tiswaran. Are you here? Can the officers let me know if Aaron...
Chair, he was logged in at the meeting, but I don't know whether he's lost connection.
So he's not in at the moment?
Yeah, he was.
Okay.
He was at the minute ago, but I think he's lost connection.
Why don't we give him a few seconds or so to come back, and maybe one of our planning officers can address that legal point that was just raised by Mr. Kratz. Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you, Chair. It is a new type of application that's come in, this prior approval. So it's not entirely clear until we get a legal interpretation what the case on that is. I would invite Jonathan Lewis, my line manager, if he's got any comments on that, because as it stands, I think we're going to need some feedback on that. It's correct. The wording is such that it is above the topmost floor. Whether it's the topmost floor of the bit that's below it or the very highest part of the building, I can't actually give you that information at the moment. So we're a little bit stuck there, I'm afraid. This is the first I've heard of this this assertion at the meeting today. So I would look to pass on to Jonathan if he has anything to add to that. Thank you.
We'll see. Jonathan.
Chair, I'm busily looking up the amendments to the GPDO on this. I can't provide you with an instant response. We have been proceeding in good faith on this, that the approach that we're taking is consistent with the GPDO. But the last thing I would want members to do, given that there has been local opposition to the proposals, is to let members make a decision which could then be subject of a legal challenge, because that would be time consuming and unwise. But as I've said, at this very minute, I am just working my way through the legislation off screen. If for any reason members feel that it's not appropriate to delay the consideration of the application this evening, then obviously, Councillor Ward, you may choose to offer up to members the option to defer. But if you would give me a few minutes to read through the legislation, then I'll do my best to advise members accordingly.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I can't see, other officers will advise me. Has Aaron managed to rejoin the meeting?
Chair, no. So if you want to go to the agent, but advising that he has 3 minutes and not 6 minutes.
Exactly, yes. So Jonathan Merch of the agent, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, councillors. My name is John Merch from Davies Merch, and I am the agent for the application. The application requests that the council confirm my client's permitted development rights to provide an additional 5 residential homes on the buildings known as Vista and Prospect House. The development is entirely consistent with the intentions of the council's emerging small sites toolkit, which specifically identifies opportunities provided by rooftops to deliver more homes. The toolkit identifies a number of examples in the borough where such developments have been delivered successfully. The development is also consistent with the council's emerging local plan, which identifies Collier's Wood as one of the main locations in the borough for housing intensification. The application carefully considers the various tests that are subject to the prior approval process, which confirms there would be no basis for refusing permission. This is also confirmed within the officer's report. In relation to construction, I would like to assure members that my client is one of the country's largest landlords who have significant experience of these sorts of developments where there are existing residents in situ. They put the welfare of residents front and centre to ensure that any disruption is kept to a minimum. Detailed analysis has been undertaken by a structural engineer to confirm that the building is able to support the additional homes and that construction will be a relatively straightforward undertaking. Furthermore, the regulations require that a construction method statement is submitted to the council before works commence to ensure officers are satisfied that construction impacts are minimised. We would therefore ask that the committee recognises the opportunity to provide much needed additional new homes on this highly sustainable site and that my client's permitted development rights are confirmed. And just a point to add to the end, if I may, I am looking at the regulations that are set out that relate to this, and I do entirely disagree with the points raised by Mr. Kratz. Thank you. The legislation allows for the extension of rooftops on the principal part of the building. That is taken from the regulations. I'm entirely satisfied that the application fully complies with the tests of that, and for reasons previously stated, I would respectfully request that permitted development rights are confirmed. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Before I go any further, I don't know if there's any, we'll hear from Jonathan in a second, but what we basically have here is the agent applicant having one interpretation of the new law on permitted development rights and the objector having a different interpretation, which is obviously to be expected. I think we're going to have difficulty making a yes or no decision on this unless we've got clarity on the legal position. So, Jonathan, can you provide that clarity?
Chair, it's the interpretation of the opening part of the amendments to the GPDO. If I can share my screen with you, I've got the bit of legislation that's been amended, and we have here development consisting of works for the construction of up to 2 additional stories of new dwelling houses immediately above the existing topmost residential story on a building which is purpose built. Whether or not a lawyer would take the view that that could be 2 stories above the part of the building immediately underneath the new extension is something that I would imagine that a developer would wish to promote, and perhaps someone seeking to resist a proposal would seek to challenge. But I'm afraid I think it's something which perhaps could be open to interpretation. And as I've said, the last thing I want to do this evening is to lead members in a direction which exposes them to a legal challenge. So all I would say at the moment is the wording of that class, I believe, could be interpreted in different ways.
Thank you. Well, therein lies our problem. It could be interpreted in different ways. Our objector is interpreting it one way, and entirely understandably, our agent is interpreting it the other way. And without being able to have any clarification, the choices we have are to make a decision tonight either way, which might be subject to legal challenge from either side, or to defer to get clarity on the legal position. I think, I don't think I want to open it to councillors for questions on the specifics of the proposed building at this stage, because until we've got this issue sorted, I don't think we want to start talking about light and windows and things. So does anyone have anything to add on this legal issue, and whether we should go forward with either making a decision or deferring? And I see Peter Southgate.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, a very significant doubt has been raised here, hasn't it? To my way of thinking, the phrase immediately above the topmost story is pretty clear, but we can't possibly risk, I think, taking a decision whilst ambiguity over the interpretation remains. And I would move for deferral.
Thank you. I saw Councillor Quilliam. Anything to add on that?
Yeah, yes, it was just really a follow-up to Jonathan to say if he's aware of the likelihood we'll get clarity, is and this is probably why we will need a further legal opinion, but is there likely to be sufficient I guess case law around this that would be able to inform us if we come back in the next meeting or the meeting after?
Chair, I think from the perspective of safeguarding the council's position on legal challenges, it's really whether or not the council has acted recklessly or unreasonably. And I think if there was a legal opinion provided by the council's own legal services, even though that legal opinion in its own right could be the subject of a challenge, the council could at least demonstrate that in reaching its decision, it wasn't made in a reckless or uninformed manner, which I think would at least show that the council was treating the matter seriously and was doing its level best to reach a balanced and informed judgment.
Okay, I think I'm reading the mood of the meeting. Can I see a seconder for Peter Southgate's motion for deferral? Or I'm seeing, yes, I'm seeing Councillor Draper. Oh, Councillor Draper first, then Alan Brutus.
Thank you very much, Chair. Very, very quickly, I'm all in favour of deferral, and certainly second it should you ask. But the cladding was mentioned during the course of the representations, and given the unfolding position in the Commons at the moment, it might be useful if we're having a deferral to actually have some further clarity on that, particularly if I'd hate us to come back and then defer again because the Commons have changed their minds on exactly what cladding is acceptable or not. Thank you very much. That's all I was going to say.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Alan Brutus, Stephen.
Thank you. I'm a bit more bullish about this. I do believe that we won't be any further forward if we defer. And the legal position is from our lawyers. The only way to get these things on the table is by taking the decision today pro the development. I think the agent for the developer has made their point, and I respect Philip Kratz and his opinion. I think this does fall into line with what we're aiming to do here in the London Borough of Merton. It is within our remit. And, you know, all this prior development and so on goes back to Mr. Or Lord Eric Pickles and so on, pitching councils with residents against each other. I think there's enough there that the interpretation that we're applying to it, if we do go for it, will be respected. I just worry that a deferral will get us anywhere forward, whereas a decision to go for more housing, which is what the pressure is on, is the best way forward. But obviously, you know, councillors have their own views, but I would go for approval.
Thank you. I think it sums it up nicely. If we go for deferral and come back in a month's time and find there is no further clarity, then one council somewhere in the country is just going to bite the bullet and make a decision on this, and maybe it does get challenged, and then we'll have case law, and then it'll be clear. And if it happens to be us that does that, well, I don't think, as Jonathan Lewis explained, we'd be liable for lots of costs and damages for making a poor decision. We make a decision based on what we have in front of us. So I think we could defer for a month till the next meeting, and we may not be any further forward at that point, or we could make a decision tonight. So again, I always like the last one. It's just really a question of in what order do we take the votes. But Councillor Southgate did first propose deferral, so I'm going to take a vote on deferral first. If that passes, clearly we defer it. If it falls, then we'll move to a more general discussion on approval or not of the application. So by show of hands first, and we will do a Zoom vote if this looks close, those in favour of deferral to the next meeting. I'm seeing 5, and those against. Aye. And the chair's casting vote will go against. So we're going to decide it tonight. So now I will move back on the agenda to questions to officers about the actual detail of the proposal. We have now decided we're going to either approve or refuse this tonight. So questions to officers on the details of the proposal in front of us. Oh, Joan, then, sorry, Councillor Henry, then Alan Breeches.
Right, okay. Thank you for Chair. My first question is, I'd like to get some more information around the cladding, because as you know, that's one of the most important things we have to look at where building, especially high buildings, are concerned nowadays. And the other thing is the adopted road. I think, if I heard correctly, that that would have to go through to the residents. But as we may realize that while the building work will be taking place, the adopted road is going to be used and possible damage to a further extent. What will happen? Are they going to ensure that the adopted road is user-friendly for everyone, or are they going to leave it in a condition that it's going to cause problems, because it's going to come right back to us as councillors?
Sorry, I muted myself. Thank you. I think that's partly been covered, but if the officer wants to come back on that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. I'll take the adopted or unadopted road matter first. So the access road is unadopted. It's not within council ownership, so there is no jurisdiction from the council over the maintenance of that. It is something which is the responsibility of the owners of the site and the management company. So whilst the condition of the road is such that additional transport and traffic on it could have a adverse impact, it's not something that we could reasonably refuse the application on, nor would it be something that the council would need to be involved in later because it's not an adopted highway. Further than that, all I can tell you is that it's not something that we can reasonably form a reason for refusal on because it is not part of the adopted highway.
Okay.
On the cladding, I would direct your attention firstly to the mod sheet, which deals with the issues of fire safety. You'll see in the committee report that there is a paragraph that specifically addresses the legislative framework that we can make this decision under. And you'll see that fire safety is not covered as a material planning consideration in this application, but is dealt with at the building control stage. So whilst issues of fire safety are, as you say, absolutely paramount, particularly given the times that we're in, it's simply a matter of at what stage they are assessed, and there is no provision in the legislation to assess the impacts of fire safety at this stage. However, notwithstanding that, the applicant and the owner recognises the importance of this, and that's why they have communicated to us the information that we have in the mod sheet to show that this is a matter they are taking seriously, and they're aware that it is a matter that would have to be dealt with at the building regulation stage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Alan Baritis, I believe you have a question.
Yes, thank you. And can you thank the agent for their mod sheet on the issue of fire safety and cladding? That's very, very reassuring. And yes, of course, it is something that needs to be done under building control, but it could be something for the future for this government to bring it into the planning regulations arena, but obviously it's not there now. Tim, just talk me through our small size toolkits. The agent talked about how this fits in perfectly with Merton's small size toolkit, and that's what they've done.
Thank you, Chair. Well, the small sites toolkit relates to how development on small sites should be carried out. So a lot of the development that Merton sees will be infill developments and small scale developments rather than a massive redevelopment of an area. We do obviously have a mix. But basically what the agent is referring to is that this ultimately is the kind of area or site where we would be looking to optimize housing provision. It's previously developed land, it's already built upon. It is obviously part of the government's current thrust of direction to significantly increase housing provision. So that is what the agent refers to, that it falls within the guidance of where we would be advising that small developments take place. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that. I'm very pleased with that response.
Okay. Do I have any other questions on clarification on the proposals? Is that Councillor Draper? Nick?
Thank you very much. Again, it's a question. It's pretty much the same question I asked before, and I've heard what's been said about the cladding, and I do understand that currently that is the position. But we also know that the legislation on cladding was only made yesterday, day before yesterday, in the House of Commons, and we know that it's subject to change. We know it's being debated very intensely. To a certain extent, it's a crystal ball question. What happens if we approve this, which under current legislation, apparently we have to? Not that I've got anything against the thing anyway, but and then we're found in the near future to find ourselves on the wrong side of the law for so doing because of a changing political situation.
I'm not sure we can have an answer to that other than we will have to see what happens. And we don't know whether we're going to approve or not this tonight. We don't know what changes will be made in the House of Commons. We don't know what any other legal things might happen over the dispute that we talked about earlier. So I don't think the council will be blamed for making a decision one way or the other tonight. I think we have decided we are going to make one. So unless an officer's got anything more to add to that, I'm going to move to comments on the actual application.
No, thank you. There's nothing further to add on that.
Okay, so comments from members of the committee on the application itself. Councillor Draper again, Nick.
I think it's beautiful. I think it's lovely. You know, it's a very, very clever extension to the building, and I can't help but like it. You know, my concern is the concern that I've raised already, and although I'd hate to disagree with you, Chair, I'm sure that we would, were the legislation to change, we would be held accountable. But thank you very much.
Any other comments? Councillor Allen-Britis, and then Southgate.
Yes, this is a classic infill application. We're a classic infill borough. We do not have huge tracts of brownfield sites, rather like other local authorities, Barking and Dagenham. We are a council that is infilling, and this is, as Nick said, a very, very clever addition, and we should vote for it if we abide by our very own toolkits. And I know Nick is passionate about issues of safety. We all are, but I do not see how legislation could be applied retrospectively on a quasi-judicial planning authority decision. I think we should go for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Southgate, Peter, and then Quillen.
Chair, I can't altogether agree with Councillor Allen-Britis that this is a classic infill. I mean, it's never been done before, has it? It would be a pioneering interpretation of the PD regulations. And for that reason, I am very nervous, I have to say, about opening this up to a potential judicial review. I mean, let another council do the legwork there. These things can be very, very expensive, very time consuming. So together with Councillor Draper's concern about the cladding and, as I say, the interpretation and that particular phrase about building, here we are, immediately above the topmost story. You know, that's not the case here. Minor things with the development, single aspect units and shortfalls in amenity space. I don't think they actually stack up to grounds for refusal, but I'm really not happy to vote for something that is in such a fluid state in terms of legal interpretation. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you. Well, that, I mean, has been decided with the vote earlier. We are going to vote for or against tonight. So, and I think on the point of sort of letting someone else do it, if it has to go to legal proceedings, then, well, if in all walks of life and with other councillors, we just said, well, that's too difficult to wait for someone else to do it. Sometimes we have to step up and say, well, we need clarity on this, so maybe it is us that will do it. I don't know. But Councillor Quilliam, Carl.
Well, I was going to start by saying I think I broadly agree with Councillor Allen-Britis, but actually I also agree with Councillor Southgate in the sense that I don't think there's anything material in here that does stack up to grounds for refusal, and for that reason, you know, given we are making a decision, and I think it's right that we do make a decision, then I'll be supporting it tonight. Okay,
I'm going to take that as a proposal to go with the officer's recommendation of approval. Can I see a seconder for that? Councillor Allen-Britis. Okay, we will move to the vote. As before, if it's clear, majority one way or the other, we'll take it as that. If not, we will go to the Zoom vote to clarify. So, as a show of hands first, can I see all those in favour of the officer's recommendation of approval? One, two, and myself. 1, 2, 3. I'm seeing 5, I think. And those against? I think I'm seeing 6 actually. But
yeah, Chair, it was 6. It was 6.
Yeah. And those against, I'm seeing 3. Anyone not voting? Councillor Crowe. Was that added to the 3 against or not voting, Councillor Crowe?
Not voting, Chair.
Not voting. Okay, so I make that 6-3-1. That is clear. We don't need to do the Zoom vote. It's that application is approved. That was agenda item 6. We're not moving to agenda item 7, as explained earlier, because that has no speaker, so that will come last. So we move to agenda item 8, which is Hamilton Road in South Wimbledon in the Abbey Ward, and Tim Bryson is the officer going to present this one.
Thank you, Chair. Members, so the application site is at 3 Hamilton Road in South Wimbledon. The property is a typical 2-storey terrace property in this location. The site surroundings are also residential. The proposal is existing plans, so typical mid-terrace house of traditional form in this road. Has the side return open at the moment. It has 4 bedrooms, 1 within the roof space. This is existing front of the building and rear. The proposal itself is for a 1-storey rear and side extension, and also a basement under the full footprint of the house, and also under the extension proposed at the rear, and also a light well created at the front of the property as well. The proposed basement, as I said, would be full width of the plot. It would include additional living space at basement level. A rear light well courtyard is proposed with a walkover glass above, and a front light well proposed with metal walk-on bars at the front. Turning to the some roof plans. So there's no changes to the very top floor. You can just see the roof of the 1-storey inside extensions here. Turning to section drawing. So what is proposed is to continue essentially the front bay window below ground level in terms of design, which would be partially visible through the flat light well at ground floor level above. On the rear, the 1-storey extensions are typical brick extension with a pitch roof in the centre, infilling the side return as well. So here, just some further section drawings you can see of the scheme. Just some of the detailed construction drawings submitted with the application. Members will note the comments in the consultation submitted from our structural engineer and flood risk officer in looking at the basement aspect of the proposal. This is the site at the moment. So there's a high wall this side. The 1-storey extension would come a bit beyond this wall and of similar depth to the existing side return to the adjacent property. And at the front, the proposed light well would be here. As outlined, it would be walk-on metal bars light well, and with a bay window in terms of design continuing below. If I could draw members' attention to the modification sheet, where we've had additional comments from Environmental Health Officer have come through, recommending an additional condition to be imposed. Further, our Tree and Landscape Officer has recommended additional conditions to ensure tree protection. So overall, Chair, the proposal considers a meet policy is therefore recommended permission be granted. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, on this we have an objector down to speak, Emma Bertuzzi, I believe of the house next door. And I can see you in the meeting. Please unmute and you'll have your 3 minutes.
Good evening. I live, as you said, at number 1 Hamilton Road. Hamilton Road is a quiet, no-tree road lined by mature trees which add character and value to the street scene. I and 20 others on the road have made written objections to the excavation for a number of reasons. There is a mature 2-storey London plane tree sited on the pavement in front of the property. Now, I've just heard for the first time about a report. Certainly that's news to me about that tree. The planning officer's report states that the council's tree and landscape officer has not commented on the application. And I just wanted to draw to your attention that there is an email on the planning portal's page from Merton's landscape and trees officer who describes the tree at the front as a small tree, possibly a crabapple tree. Now, she notes that the tree is likely to be affected and that the application does not explain how the work is to be carried out to the front, and is likely to be more extensive than shown on the plans. And she goes on to note that comments have not been received from the street trees side, but it's unclear now whether they have been. She recommends conditions, as does the planning officer, but this misses the point because DMD2 states that proposals for basements will be expected to not cause loss or damage to trees. And the SPD basement guidance recognises that tree roots and branches are easily damaged. Tree roots are especially vulnerable to compaction damage. Vibration during piling has the potential to destabilise nearby trees, and altered soil drainage patterns may affect tree health and longevity. Now, given the risk recognised to exist for a small apple tree, it must follow that the risk to a mature plane tree is greater, and an arboricultural plan should be obtained before permission is granted to ascertain the extent of the risk and therefore whether DMD2 can actually be met. Now, this is safer than leaving that tree and other neighbouring mature trees exposed to the risk of accidental and irretrievable damage during the works, whilst the builders seek to comply with conditions.
1 minute remaining.
And to do otherwise is contrary to DMD2. Large mature trees are a distinctive feature of Hamilton Road, which we should be preserving. Paragraph 10.6 of SPD 9 states that basement developments that are modest in size, such as those which do not extend beyond the footprint of the original building, are often the most appropriate way to extend a building below ground. And measured against this, the development is not modest in size, since the planned side return and rear extension are not part of the original building, and so the basement will extend beyond the footprint of the original building. DMD2 requires any light wells to be sited to avoid any harmful visual impact, and basements are out of character to the area. There are none in the battles, and no consideration seems to have been given to the fact that number 3 has a crossover, the garden has been paved over, there's no boundary wall, there are no screens, and so it will be conspicuous when viewed from the pavement and particularly from my property. And finally, in terms of flood risk, there's a real concern on the street that whilst conditions have been imposed to avoid this, if a precedent is set, then that will affect the water table across the battles in due course. So we would urge you to not grant the permission for the excavation. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I believe we've contacted the agent, but they haven't come back saying they want to use their 3 minutes to speak. Is that correct?
Yes, I can confirm the agent's not present at the meeting.
Okay, so the other speaker we have on this one is the local Abbey Ward councillor, Councillor Ben Butler. Are you in the meeting, Ben?
I am, Chair. Thank you.
I can see you there. You get 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to thank Emma Bertuzzi and her neighbours for their work in engaging with this application. Emma has already laid out the case against this development in detail, so I'll only summarise the main reasons why I'm helping echo residents' objections this evening. Firstly, from reading the paper itself, I'm not sure I remember seeing an application with so many conditions attached to approval. I wouldn't agree, as this report summarises, that this application needed, quote, no further assistance in its completion to then end up attaching this many conditions to carry out the work if given approval. As we've heard, amongst other issues, residents are particularly concerned with the potential loss of iconic larger trees on the street. And there's also a concern that the plans laid out do not address all concerns regarding the flooding risk. Finally, residents on Hamilton Road are rightly concerned about the impact of this application to the local character of the street. This type of development would be at odds with the type of homes that surround it. This is especially impactful if you consider the precedent, as Emma said, that would be introduced here. This application, if approved, could start a trend on the street that would further alter the character and scene of the street, and also potentially amplify the existing flood risk on the street if multiple properties were to follow similar plans. And I'd just like to thank again residents for taking the time to discuss this application, and to thank the committee tonight for allowing me to further represent their views. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Right. It's Tim Bryson. Do you have anything specific to come back on those comments from the residents and the councillor?
Really, Chair, the with basement applications, they do get very technical, which is why we do have quite a high number of conditions on this application. It is a big basement for terrace property. Is under the footprint of the house and under part of the extensions proposed at the back. But it is less than 50% of the rear garden, which is one of the policy tests in our adopted plan. And with regards to the trees, in the absence of street tree officers input, we have sought obviously views from our tree and landscape officer on the impact on trees, and yes, she has recommended conditions further details to be submitted. And in terms of flood risk and drainage, we have obviously sought the views of our flood risk officer in assessing the information submitted, and has satisfied it can be accommodated subject to conditions for further detail. I appreciate there is further detail obviously to be submitted with the conditions, but that is how we have treated basement applications during the in the past. So really that's just my comments on technical aspects. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we move to councillors' questions of clarification on the report. Councillor Crowe, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. At the front of the house, there seems to be off-street parking, and that's obviously a good thing in the road like Hamilton Road, which is very congested with parking. My question is, does the front light well impact that off-street parking? Because I would hate to think you would lose off-street parking because we've created a light well because of the basement.
Thank you, Chair. As far as I could see, there is no off-street parking at the front. If you bear with me, I'll just go to the photograph. I mean, the distance there, I believe, cannot fit a car on it without overhanging the part of the pavement. The light well, I mean, yes, that does come forward of the bay window. So clearly that would obstruct if any car can park there. But I think to bear in mind, it is one space if a car can park there. Given the site's in a sustainable location, I think we'd have difficulty resisting an application on a loss of a parking space. I think in any event.
Thank you. I think on this one, to break with what we normally do, normally the objector gets to speak and then doesn't get to speak any later in the meeting. But as Bertuzzi lives next door, she may be able to tell us if that frontage of that property is used for parking a vehicle. If you're nodding, sorry, you're on mute still, Emma. I don't know if you can.
Yes, it is. It is. They park their car there.
Right, thank you for that. So, yes, there's off-street parking, and we'd hope, even if this was approved and the light well was put in, there'd still be room for off-street parking there, so as not to add to the congestion in terms of parking on the rest of the street. I don't think we can be certain of that, because the officer's response to Councillor Crow's question just then was, no, there isn't off-street parking. Well, there clearly is. So, do you have anything further on that, Tim?
I think, Chair, I mean, there's loss of a parking space. It is one space for the property. So I think my advice is that it would be difficult to resist to defend that at appeal, for example, with the loss of the parking space in the road. But I appreciate that as a judgment for members this evening.
Okay. I think I would presume, but we can't really presume. I'd presume that the owners of the property, when putting a light well in, because they obviously benefit from having off-street parking, will want to be able to keep that and not overhang the car onto the pavement if they do park the car on the front. It's good that it was raised, but I'm not sure, as you say, I'm not sure it's a major issue that would cause us to refuse. Anyway, any further questions? Councillor Crowe, do you want to come back on that, or another question? And then Councillor Allenbury.
I'd like to come back in it and suggest that maybe we could condition that the grille that is installed above the light well is of sufficient strength that it can support a weight of a car, or a big car for that matter. So
I think on that, officers will advise, is it possible to condition that enough room for an off-street parking space for a normal sized car should be retained on the frontage of the property?
Chair, yes, what we could do is condition for the light well not to be enclosed, perhaps with a structure of sorts. So they couldn't, for example, put up a low retaining wall, which would stop a car bonnet going over the light well. But yes, either that or your suggested condition about retaining the retaining an off-street parking space would be fine, because actually that would prevent them from enclosing it. So
okay, so if approved, we would add that condition if that's agreeable, unless I see anyone vehemently shaking their head, if that's agreeable to the rest of the committee. Okay, I'll move to comments on the application itself. Councillor D. David.
I think that basements has been quite controversial over the years on this committee, and the officers have modified the rules and regulations around basements. But I've never felt they've gone far enough. And I think in particular, when we've talked about detached houses with large gardens, there have been arguments to say that it's not going to bother neighbours. But this is a very tight road. And it isn't just about one basement, because as officers have said in the past, that when you get an application that's successful, then you could get 20 or 30 in this road. You could have literally an enormous amount of work going on. And I'm absolutely not convinced that basements are good for very tightly packed terraced houses. As an aside, and I accept it's qualitative, I happened to be digging a hole about 200 or 300 meters away last Saturday. And I dug it to 12 inches, and literally within 30 minutes, that was completely full to the top with water. That's how high the water table is. So I'm absolutely sure that if anything was happening in this garden, then it would be waterlogged immediately. We've heard from outside the borough about problems in other boroughs. Some boroughs have been banning basements. And I think fundamentally, whatever your views are on the safety of this, ultimately, we're not looking to increase the housing stock here. We're not saying this is another family that could move in or individuals. What we're saying is that one house is going to be bigger. My huge concern is this will open up the barriers and you could have thousands of these basements being built, but you're not adding to the housing stock one iota. And I think Councillor Butler made some extremely good points. And I can't see why the council officers and councillors need to accept the need to expand this house into the garden and into the basement. And I think we should reject it as it is. But of course, having an extension is perfectly acceptable. But I think basements is a fundamental strategic issue which we need to face and reject. So I will be calling and proposing rejection.
Okay. I will come to Councillor Southgate and then Councillor Christie in just a second, then Councillor Alan Beaches. But from officers, because Councillor Dean just proposed rejection, not adding any grounds on which we would reject. If we were to reject this application, on what grounds would we do that?
Chair, so I think with a basement, clearly a lot of it is underground and not visible. So I think my advice is really the visual impact of the basement. And its scale is one thing, but then we do our policy about no more than 50% of the rear garden for a basement. So we have had an appeal that comes to mind. I think it was in Highbury Road, which went to committee a couple of years ago. I think some councillors might recall it. It was a 20-odd metre basement extension into the garden. So this is the difficulties we have with basements. So although it is the full footprint and beyond of the terrace house, it's difficult to say the scale is unacceptable because of the policy. So I think visually, perhaps if the light well causes issues visually from the street scene or from the rear, but the rear is limited, obviously. So really, I think with the technical responses we've got on the file from our experts in terms of structural and flood risk, I think really sort of visual impact aspects of the basement is obviously still one of the key considerations with the basement.
Okay, thank you. There are three councillors up, and I'll take Councillor Christie first, Billy.
Thank you, Chair. It was to say the objector, sorry, I can't see her surname, so I don't want to mispronounce it. The objector said, or a large portion of her contribution was to talk about the impact that the proposal could have on the tree that's outside the front of the property. And we weren't really able to have a sufficient response to the concerns that she raised. And it's in the modification sheet that one of the conditions will be that additional additional information will be supplied, before development can go ahead. That is the third time tonight out of 3 applications that objectors have raised concerns, and we have not been able to be provided full information or be satisfied that we, in making a decision, are or have satisfied ourselves that the objectors' concerns have been met. So I suppose my concern here is that we are being asked to make the decisions, which I understand the need to actually make decisions, but my concern is that applications are being brought to this committee without full information, particularly where it pertains to the concerns that objectors are raising and presumably have raised in writing before this committee. So that's the comment I would like to make here. I don't know whether I want to reject this application or not, and it concerns me that concerns have been raised by the objector, and we are not at this decision-making stage able to respond to those concerns. So that's the comment I'd like to make.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Southgate, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. This basement, it's vast. It's 113 square metres. And just to remind members, that equates to 2 one-bed, 2-person flats. So I guess there are a lot of and yet we know, I mean, fundamentally it's underground. It does not form part of the public realm. We can only challenge, if we wish to, the surrounds, the light well, and so on. I mean, if members are minded to approve this, I would like to add a condition that its occupancy should be ancillary to the enjoyment of the host dwelling. That's the sort of language that will meet with Mr. Lewis's approval. I guess it would be too easy, and hypothetically one might ask what would happen if in future application came back to run a set of stairs down to the basement from the front. Could be easily done from that hard standing as we've seen it. Would that meet with approval? Or would it be possible to resist it? So, as I say, we need to be confident. And Councillor Dean rightly points out, it doesn't add to the stock of housing in the borough. But equally, thinking of areas of Victoria and London, we don't want really to be creating a whole new wave of basement flats, do we? So that's a suggested condition. Officers may wish to comment. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes, I think that's a point, that if you gave permission for this, it could be possible to convert the whole of the basement floor into a 2-bedroom flat and rent it out. What guard against that do we have, officers?
Chair, the suggested condition of ancillary use is perfectly acceptable to use, and that's the only guard we have, essentially.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah.
I had Councillor Alambritis, Stephen, I think, raised his hand earlier.
Yes, thank you. I'm really surprised that we're going on and on and on about a modest application for a basement extension, which is the law which the government has put into place. I know a lot of local authorities, Tory, Kensington and Chelsea, Tory Wandsworth, are backtracking all the time with regard to their basement applications. This is modest, this is small. I know it's the first one, provided the amenity for the houses on either side are vouchsafed. There's an industry in basement extensions with regard to structures and safety. I think we really should be spending this long on an application given by a professional technical officers of this local authority for a modest basement extension, and we're spending more than half an hour on this. Please, let's get some sense and pass this so we can get on with our lives.
Thank you for that, Stephen. I see you, Councillor Dean, but I think, taking into account what Councillor Alambritis has said,
he made 2 points though that are not correct. It's very important, Chair.
I will give you a minute or two. Go on, David.
First of all, this committee is a quasi-legal committee. It's not about leaving the meeting as soon as possible. It's about respecting both applicants and objectors. And I'm hearing constantly about moving on. I think that we haven't been furnished with all the information. I think it's critical, because people's livelihoods are at stake here, that we respect the whole process. And if councillors don't want to be on this 5-hour meeting, I'd suggest you shouldn't be on planning. This is how we do it. And I think that residents respect councillors for doing the job properly, not just rushing through things. I think that Councillor Southgate is right. The huge sizes, if this is modest, my God, I mean, blimey, this is bigger. I know, you know, some people live in very large houses. This is bigger than most houses that I've seen. And there is a huge impact. And it isn't just about today. It's about the fact that already 2 other people have said they were keen to watch today. And if this basement goes through, they'll be doing the same thing. So therefore, I think that we should, and it's not a government proposal either. This is the regulation by the London Borough of Merton. So that's why it's important that you take your time to understand the principles in this case, rather than just poo-pooing everything that comes through. I say that we reject this on impact. I think it's important for the people in the Abbey ward who live in lots of very tight terrace houses, which are wonderful, which compared to many parts of the borough are not that expensive, except they are very expensive. But we should think about the residents who live in the area and think about the possibilities here. And we reject it on impact, ask them to come back with something smaller, respect the people that they live amongst. And I'm proposing rejection based on the officer's request of impact. And I hope others will support me. I can't see what the problem is. We are not increasing the housing stock. We are protecting the residents. I don't see the issue there.
Okay, thank you. Well, as it makes no material, nobody has proposed deferral on this, so it's accept or refuse, and it makes no material difference how we do the vote on this. So I'm going to move straight to the vote. I'm going to go for, firstly, those in favour of the officer's recommendation to grant planning permission. Those in favour. I'm seeing 3. Those against. I'm also seeing 3. Those not voting. 4. Which means it's a tie. And I have the chair's casting vote. I'm having real difficulties with this because that was so split, 3, 3 and 4 not voting.
They can always come back, Chair. They can always come back with a smaller offer. I think it's better to err on the safety side, and I do hope that you will back rejection. I hope you don't mind me saying so.
I think, taking into account Councillor Christie's comments earlier on the trees and the information, I'm going to also not vote, meaning it's a tie, and suggest a deferral. Is the member of the committee in agreement with that? Shall we take a vote on that? To defer for a meeting to get further information. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I believe. All those against? And 1, Stephen, Councillor Crowe and Councillor Dean not voting.
And Chair, can I just clarify that we're asking for this further information that the tree officer has outlined?
Yes, exactly what you raised earlier on about the ability to respond to Ms. Bertucci's comments about the tree.
Thank you.
Okay, that one, number 8, is decided. We are 2 hours into the meeting, and do members want a 5-10 minute comfort break? Let's say 10. I make it 21:08. 21:18 we will resume. Okay, we are due to restart in 3 minutes. So can I encourage members to start retaking their seats? Okay, a minute till we're due to start. There we are, we're back. I'm going to assume that here comes Councillor Southgate. Very good. Councillor McGrath's back on video. I'm assuming Billy is, Councillor Christie is there and will be rejoining soon. Agenda item 9 is Landgrove Road in Wimbledon Park Ward, and the planning officer is Tim Bryson to present.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. The application, members, is on in the corner of Landgrove Road and Strathern Road in Wimbledon. The site comprises a detached building at the back of this site outlined in red here. The building was built under planning permission allowed on appeal 2007 reference number within the report. That application formed part of a wider extension to create flats to these units here with the outbuilding at the back. The site surroundings is residential and largely residential gardens close by to the site. Some existing elevations. So it is a detached building. It was originally built as a garage and storage structure to be ancillary to one of the flats on Landgrove Road. Subsequently, you'll see in the planning history some changes of use over time to home office ancillary to the same flat. And the application now before us is to convert it to a 1-bedroom dwelling house. So here's the proposed ground floor plan. Access off the pavement here, pedestrian access into a amenity space, bedroom ground floor, and washroom downstairs with kitchen living area above. The proposed changes to the building is on the elevation that faces the road itself, with a new window inserted there, along with windows inserted within a new garage style door elevation here to provide light to the to the bedroom downstairs. There are no changes to the other elevations as part of this application. The application has been subject to amendments within the modification sheet, where you'll see additional consultation response received and officers' response to that, and also officers in terms of reassessing the gross internal floor area of the building have recommended the amendments to the tables within. So this is a section drawing just showing some of the headroom at first floor level to the building, and some site photographs. So this is the building here. So access would simply be through here, pedestrian access. That's where that new window is going, and the windows above the garage door here. As I said, it formed part originally of a planning permission, which you can see that's been built out here, subject of the appeal in 2007 for flats. On the site itself, as you can see, it's a typical brick structure, and here as well. So there are no changes proposed to this part of the building. Access will remain the same, and the only changes, physical changes to the building, is on the elevation that fronts the road. Overall, Chair, officers consider it's a good use of an existing building and provides acceptable standard of accommodation for future residents. Officers therefore recommend permission be granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have speakers on this. Two objectors, both from their addresses seem to be very local to the site. First one is James Davis. Are you here?
I am, yes, thank you.
And you have 3 minutes, thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, if you permit this development, you will allow the planning process to be abused. Planning permission was given for the construction of this garage on appeal as part of a wider development in November 2008. The grant of planning permission was subject to a condition that the building only be used as a garage. Notwithstanding that, the garage was not constructed in accordance with the approved scheme. 2 large windows were built into the side of the garage, as you've just seen, facing the rear of properties on Landgrove Road. The internal layout was altered to add a bathroom. A garden was created to serve the garage. And it's been revealed by drawings produced today that the height of the first floor was built a foot lower than the scheme permitted, thereby allowing it to comply with prescribed residential space standards. Why would a garage require large windows, a bathroom, and a garden? A further planning application was made in 2017, seeking to remove the condition restricting use to that of a garage and permitting use as a home office. In light of the unauthorised elements of the construction, concerns were raised that this was a precursor to use of the building as a dwelling. In 2 emails to the planning officer, which you should have, Mr. Bennett of Magenta Planning Limited responded to those concerns. He said, "The letters of objection are mainly focused upon an unsubstantiated concern that it is the applicant's intention to convert the building into a dwelling at some future stage.
1 minute remaining.
The applicant has no intention of converting this building into a dwelling, either now or at any point in the future, and there is no intention of converting this building into a residential flat. The car parking space is no longer required, and this application simply responds to that change in circumstance." Permission was once again granted, yet here we are. Mr. Bennett supplied on behalf of the same landowner to convert this garage into a dwelling. In recommending approval at paragraph 7.2.4 of his report, the planning officer notes that the dwelling would be unusual and out of character, but points to the previous change of use as justification. The way these planning applications have been conducted has been thoroughly disingenuous. If you permit this development, you will allow the planning system to be undermined. You will encourage applicants not to comply with the scheme approved,
3 minutes, Chair.
build unauthorised additions in the hope that through successive applications, they can achieve what they could not in the first place.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there. You've gone over your time, but thank you very much for that. Martin Long, I see you here. You have also 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. My name is Martin Long. I've lived with my family at 23 Landgrove Road for about 18 years. Our house is next door to the site. Councillor Dean and Councillor Southgate, you may recall seeing this at committee before. You were part of the committee that refused the application initially, and one of the reasons given was that the garage building was too large. The committee had concerns that it was intended to become a house. Our planning consultant has already sent a formal document to you all outlining reasons why we are opposed to the change of use of the garage, and our local councillor will speak, and James, our neighbour, has raised the planning creep and the non-compliance with planning approval issues separately. We'd like to say how this would affect us. It's been very stressful to live next door to a site where the developer makes continual planning applications to chip away at the original consent. We believe there have been 6 applications and 2 appeals since 2008. The planning inspectorate's original approval highlighted the garage conversion issue and put in specific clauses that the garage should not be used for residential purposes and that roof glazing should be obscured to prevent overlooking. Nothing about the site has changed since then to alter the overlooking aspect. In fact, it has been made worse by the unapproved inclusion of 2 large windows at ground floor level, which are shown in the photographs, and upstairs garage windows being openable, and indeed they are often open as it's the only way to ventilate the upper floor. This negates any value of obscuring the glazing. Our existing boundary fence with number 25 is already 1.8 metres high. This fence does not solve the overlooking problem because we are higher up Landgrove Road than number 25, and the garage garden is over a foot higher than the garden of number 25. The fence does not provide enough privacy and in any case does not resolve any of the overlooking issues from the first floor levels. The proposed conversion has its entrance only about 10 metres away from and looking directly into our property. Anyone entering or leaving cannot help but to look directly into our garden and our kitchen at the moment, where we spend a lot of our time. Conversely, only last week, anyone who is in the first or second floors of 23, 25 or 27 Landgrove Road could very clearly see the naked body of a person showering in the garage through the large window. This lack of privacy is a concern both ways, I should imagine. The new home, we believe, is effectively a goldfish bowl. There is a huge difference between this building being a home office for a single person and it being a home. The hours of use are completely different and the impact on all neighbours is considerable. It would totally remove the privacy of our garden and kitchen, especially in the evenings and weekends we are most likely to be using them. We would therefore urge the committee to refuse permission for this change of use. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I have the agent down, Mr. Nigel Bennett. As there were 2 objectors having 3 minutes each, you have 6 minutes.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the committee. This is a very logical and appropriate opportunity for a new home in the borough. It's previously developed land within a existing street frontage. It involves the conversion of an existing structure that already has planning permission for a home office on both levels. Circumstances do change. And at the time of that letter that was referred to by the objector, there was no aspiration from the applicant to convert this into a house. Circumstances change, and this will actually stay within the applicant's family. So it requires as you've seen from the officer's report, it requires very minimal external changes to facilitate the proposed residential use. There'll be no impact on the street scene whatsoever, other than an improved front street elevation. No impact on the character of the Kenilworth Avenue conservation area. And I don't believe any impact on the amenity of the neighbours either. There is an appropriate screen there with the rear of Langrove Road property. No new window or door openings that would affect them. Provides good quality accommodation and amenity space to satisfy all of the council's relevant space standards and those of the London Plan. Our only query on the officer's report is a recommendation for a car-free agreement. This is a PTAL 2 zoning, so it's quite low public transport accessibility. There is actually quite a lot of spare capacity on this street and in those surrounding it. And by reinstating the curb, the proposal does actually create a new car parking space on the street. So it does feel just a little bit harsh that the new occupier will be restricted in this way. So if members are minded to approve our application this evening, could we perhaps ask them to have a look at that and consider whether it's actually really necessary for it to be car free in this location? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Our final speaker on this is Councillor Una Moulton, the member for the ward in question. You also have 3 minutes, Councillor Una.
Thank you, Chairman, and for inviting me to speak. And I do so on behalf of the local ward councillors for Wimbledon Park Ward. We support the objections from residents concerning this planning application and the change of use of the former, and I have to say it with light-heartedness, garage situated behind 25 to 27 Landgrove Road. Committee members, this building was never built with the intention of using it as a garage. And indeed, when it was built, there was a step up to it, meaning it can never even be used as a garage, and I'm not aware of it being done so. The building was not built in accordance with the approved plans. Indeed, it was built with a number of additions contrary to the planning permission. The roof windows, hardly necessary for such a garage, should have been opaque as specified in the plans to protect neighbours' amenity, and 2 additional large windows were added onto the side of the building directly facing the rear properties on Landgrove, and the internal layout was altered to add a bathroom. In addition, a garden was added to serve this garage. Chairman, there is a record of persistent breaches of planning control. It's clear that the building was never ever used as a garage, but firstly as an office, and was subsequently granted permission as a home office. However, it's also clear that they'd always wanted to use it as a residence and a dwelling, contrary to a number of promises and statements made by the applicants. And indeed, as local councillors, we had to take up complaints with the council when it was rented out. The planning creep is exactly what was feared by local residents and neighbours, and has caused them stress and anxiety over many years. Neighbours object to their loss of amenity, as clearly there's a difference between the use of this space as an office and the use residentially, with increased noise and overlooking from both the building and the garden. Councillors, we believe that if this application is approved, the council will be condoning these breaches and rewarding them. Residential use of this building will adversely affect our residents' amenity, and we confirm that we support the objections made by the residents, and we would urge you that all committee members refuse to grant this application. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Councillor Moulton. Right, the next part is questions of clarification on the plans. I see Councillor McGrath. You're still muted, Simon.
Sorry about that. Could we
Okay.
just have some clarification, please, from the officers on whether or not the current building breaches the previous planning permissions? I was surprised to hear about these windows, and whether or not there have been any enforcement actions on any of those breaches. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of enforcement actions itself, I'm not aware of any. In terms of the ground floor windows, yes, they were different to the original scheme, allowed on appeal. But the ground floor windows, the alterations, which you can see in the photographs, they form part of this application before you this evening. So you'll note in the modifications sheet, in looking at the conditions on the appeal scheme, we have reinstated the condition for them to put in the obscure glazing for the roof lights. It's somewhat unclear whether they are obscure glaze or not, but we have reimposed that condition so that they have to be obscure glaze. So the inspector put that on to restrict overlooking to properties to the rear. So the changes have happened over time, obviously, with the applications coming in to convert it to home office use. But yeah, I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from members? Councillor Dean, David.
Yes, I'm just trying to understand the planning permission that was given by the inspector. Was that for a garage? And has there been any other planning applications since that application was approved by the inspector?
Yes, so
but carry on, Tim.
Yes, so the original application in 2007 allowed by the inspector, it was for a garage with storage above. Then you'll see in the planning history, then subsequent applications, first to various conditions to allow for use of the first floor space as home office ancillary to one of the flats, and then again they applied again to convert the ground floor, so the loss of the garage to home office as well, ancillary. So that is the planning history there, which is within the agenda.
Yeah. Any other questions? Councillor Alan Regis, Stephen.
Can the officer, Tim Bryson, just clarify for us, is it the law of this land that someone can put in frequent planning applications on the same land for different ideas over the years? And is there a stopgap? You can't do it every month, or there has to be a certain period of time. But is it the law of this land that anyone can put a planning application in for any piece of land for whatever they desire?
Yes. So as long as the application is not exactly the same as one that's been refused previously, the planning authority does have powers to reject a submission. It's quite rare that happens, but yes, people can submit applications for differing uses on a building. Yeah.
And the council stop people putting in planning applications?
No.
Thank you. Just finally from me, you say it's a good use of an existing building. Just clarify that for us.
Well, the building itself is of a reasonable size. It's got its own access from the road, and it's at the back of the flats at the back there. It is a reasonably large building for its location, but the physical structure of it was allowed at appeal. It was refused by the council, but it was allowed on appeal. The inspector felt it was an acceptable as a structure. So what we have to look at this evening is the use of it as a one-bedroom house, essentially. And given the outdoor amenity space it comes with it, and its access, and it's a house, we think it's quite a good use of the building.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions, so I'm going to move to comments from members of the committee. Councillor Draper, and then Crow.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm afraid this is one of those you snooze, you lose. I've listened very carefully to what Councillor Ambrittis was saying and the responses given. You've got, as a councillor, I believe it's a maximum of 4 years to object to changes made and insisting that they're brought back to within the planning application, what was agreed at planning. That clearly hasn't happened here. There has been a change of use, legally or otherwise, and we are where we are. I'm afraid that given that, what the officers are saying is absolutely right. Well, I can't see how we could object to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Draper. Councillor, did I say Crow next? Did you? Yes. And then Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Chair. I am rather unhappy about how we've ended up in the position we have ended up. It seems to me that an application was made for a garage, but a garage wasn't built. Then the inspector approved the garage, and then we, perhaps misguidedly, at the planning committee, approved change of use to home office. And now we have an application to turn it into a home. I find this all very unsatisfactory, but I do understand that we're here to judge the application that has been made tonight. The application that has been made tonight is to turn this existing building into a home. So the question is, what are the planning rules and regulations around this situation? And I turn to the National Planning Policy Framework for guidance, and I look at paragraph 127, and it says, planning decisions should ensure that A, developments add to the overall quality of the area, B, are visually attractive, and C, sympathetic to local character. Well, this building as a home in this location does not meet either or any of those requirements under the National Planning Policy Framework. So I think this application should be rejected on that basis. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Dean, David. Then I'll come to Councillor Henry.
Well, morally, I agree with Councillor Crow, but I do think Councillor Draper is correct. And there is, if this wasn't a serious subject, there's an irony that the applicant is asking for a parking space because he doesn't have one. He does. It's called a garage, which he's got planning permission for. If he doesn't want to use his garage, that's his problem, nobody else's. But I do think Councillor Draper is correct, and I will be supporting his opinions.
Councillor Henry, Joan.
Thank you, Chair. And I must say, I do apologize. I'm not taking part because I have a very bad internet connection. So I moved to a different direction now. So I hope it's better. Okay, I've listened to what everyone had said. And I had a very good look at the present situation and the past. And I think according to the planning application, it's fit for purpose. According to what is there at the present is not fit for purpose. And I think the present, the application and the present building that would be in force would be a character for the area. And I definitely will approve this application in the sense that it will improve the area. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not going to comment myself. I'm going to move to the vote. All those, by a show of hands first, all those in favour of this application. I see 5. All those against? I'm seeing 2. All those not voting? Also seeing 2. So I've got 1 missing, but it's 5, 2 and 2. I think it's clearly passed. So as per the officer's recommendation, planning permission is granted. We move to item 10. Item 10, 49 Queens Road, Wimbledon, in Trinity Ward. And the officer on this one is Tim Bryson again.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, Chair, some technical difficulties. Okay. Members, so the application is at 49 Queen's Road in Wimbledon. It is currently a semi-detached building. It was a dwelling house. It is now a house of multiple occupation. This is existing site plan at the moment. Fairly large semi-detached building in traditional form. So as outlined in the report, it is in a house of multiple occupation currently, with a bedroom, ground floor, 3 communal areas, shared kitchen as well. At first floor level, another shared lounge and 4 other bedrooms. The proposal is to add an additional bedroom within the roof space through the proposal of a rear dormer window with some roof lights proposed. So in terms of the additional bedroom, this is it proposed here. The plans were amended during the application process following concerns with the visual impact of the original submitted dormer window, which was wider in both directions. So that has now been reduced in size to be of similar design to the one on the adjoining property. So this is the proposed additional bedroom within the loft here. It's of a decent size. Every bedroom has its own bathroom within this house building. In terms of elevations, 2 roof lights at the front there, and a dormer window here with another roof light there. Oh, that photograph's a bit small, but this is existing front of the building. As I said earlier, it's quite a wide property. And a photograph from the rear. So the proposed dormer window would be up here. As I said, it was amended during the application process by the applicant following our concerns raised, and also the removal of a large outbuilding that was originally proposed. We both had concerns on conservation area grounds, and now what they're proposing is the dormer window. You see similar, identical to the adjoining neighbouring property here. Overall, Chair, officers consider this to be an acceptable development and recommend permission be granted. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Philip Snellune as an objector on this one. Are you here? And if so, yes, there you are. I can see you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fine. Okay. So I raised a freedom of information request to get information that seemed to be quite sorely lacking about this application. And we understood from that freedom of information request that the planning officer is minded to approve the conversion from a single family dwelling to a 10-person HMO. Residents were never aware that this was a 6-person HMO. Not that that's an issue here, but the planning officer seems to maintain that an increase of 4 people from a 6-person to a 10-person HMO is not considered to be detrimentally harmful to the character of the area. And I am here to tell the committee that that assertion is deeply flawed and it is dangerous. The real issue here is not the proposed amendments to the application outlined in section 2 of the agenda item document shared for this meeting, which are welcomed, but the prospect of 10-person HMOs and the clearly detrimental impact this has on the character of the conservation area. And it's that I would draw your attention to. The officer notes that a large number of homes are not single dwellings, but I'm afraid to say that flats are one thing, a 10-person HMO is another. What's incredible about this is that in his write-up on suggesting this should be approved, he cites Dudley Road by reference to the character appraisal, which you can find on Mercer's website. And he says residents are asked to swallow the idea that because the local character description of Dudley Road is peaceful and quiet, and that description paragraph goes on to say, unlike Queen's Road, that somehow Queen's Road is fair game for a development that is detrimental. Because parts of a conservation area are quieter than others, those less quiet roads in the conservation area seem to be fair game for this officer. He concludes that with reference to the relatively small increase to a 10, it's not detrimental. Well, it is. So there is now very real visual clutter at the property, quite apart from the refugee-like compound of sheds at the rear. We now have 8 wheelie bins, all landfill, no recycling undertaken, a washing machine and a tumble dryer plumbed into the front drive, and now the eyesore parking bollards on the pavement driveway border. The property for local residents, and this is what I hear from local residents, is that it is more like a slum and it diminishes the character of the area. Adding new housing stock or increasing affordable dwellings is no doubt very appealing, but this application of a 10-person HMO is excessive overdevelopment and cramming. It doesn't create good quality rental options, it creates slum rentals. So in summary, it just doesn't follow that Queen's Road has been appraised as suitable for this kind of development as a 10-person HMO. The council has a legal duty to preserve the character of the area. Approving the HMO will trigger many more applications like this and will destroy the character of the area. So this is a misunderstanding and a misrepresentation.
Sorry, you have done every time. Thank you. I'm going to stop you there. The agent, Anthony Day or Vanessa Stott, have 3 minutes.
Mute. Okay. Hi. Hello. We actually. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Here. Okay. This idea that I'm living in a slum is quite fanciful. We are actually in the property now. We are owner occupiers and live in this property. So the idea that it's being referred to as a slum, we've completed a refuse plan. We're fully compliant with all refuse requirements of a HMO and have completed it and been approved. So we are fully in line with all of the regulations. And as I say, it's high quality accommodation. Does this look like a slum? You can see we're in the lounge now. We wouldn't be living in a slum. And the sheds are just used for disability equipment because my husband has disabilities. So one green shed is used for a disabled vehicle, bicycles for me, and tools, etc., because we don't have the garage any longer. So I think, and the garden is fully nicely planted at the front, and I think it's enhanced the street. The street, Queen's Road, is full of semi-commercial properties. Next door but one is a HMO. There's a nursing home opposite. There's several commercial dwellings on the property. But as I say, the idea that it's a slum kind of property is it's certainly not the case. It's high quality accommodation that we enjoy living in and are maintaining well. I don't know, Tony, if you've got anything to add here.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I apologise. I pressed the wrong button. Yes, first of all, I would say as an architect and friend of Vanessa and Duncan, that what it cannot be described as a slum. These are very high quality rooms to be rented out. The visual appearance has been greatly upgraded, as the house was actually not really, was left neglected for 30 years by the previous occupant. And I think, hello?
1 minute left.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, and such items has been planting to the front, like new trees, etc. has enhanced the street pattern. What Vanessa is trying not to do is in any way cause detriment to the visual appearance, and I think it's actually greatly improved the appearance from the street in terms of repairing and planting, and in terms of obviously as discussed with the planners, the units in the back are principally used for storage for Vanessa's husband, and to call it a refugee outbuilding is disingenuous, shall one say. If one has an objection to the number of buildings, one can say that, but to use a term that does not really apply and it applies something else, I think is inappropriate. But and Vanessa will always try and do the best visual appearance for the street.
Okay, thank you. Tim, Bryson, do you have anything specific to come back on those comments?
Chair, I think in regard to the sort of touched upon in the committee report about character, I think it's the location of the site is very close to the town centre, and as you get close to the town centre, the buildings become a bit more commercial, and there are some more flats. So we have negotiated amendments on the scheme in terms of design, in terms of the dormer window. The applicants removed a large outbuilding proposed, which we objected on conservation area grounds, and to say that increasing the size of a form of residential property just by the use of it in terms of a house of multiple occupation, we can't say that's out of I can't say it's harmful in itself as a use to a conservation area. And we have in terms of bin storage, we have put a condition on requiring details of that, as this does provide an opportunity to provide proper bin storage facility for this site. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll open it up to members of the committee for firstly questions. Councillor Dean.
I had some pages missing on my information, so I just have a question, which is an easy one to answer. Has there been a change of the number of people that can live at this place under the, as the objector was talking, it went from 6 to 10. Has any changes happened there?
No, so that's what's proposed this evening. Sorry, it's a lawful house multiple occupation for up to 6 people, but the proposal is to increase that capacity.
Yes, so there is from 6 to 10. So yeah, there's the change for 1 bedroom. But essentially, more people can live in the other bedrooms than they can currently. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Ambritis. Stephen.
Thank you. And thank Tim for his report. Can you just refer? Can I refer to 631, 632? That if we do give planning permission to this, that there will be a requirement for a separate license applications and work with the council with regard to the HMO going from 6 to 10. That all that will fall into place. It's not ipso facto that we pass it today, and the Vanessa needs to do very little else. She still needs to come to us to go through those HMO regulations and plans.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, planning is separate from HMO license applications.
Okay. And just for me, one more. Sorry. Is it your interpretation, Tim, that with regard to HMOs, it's highly unusual to find the applicant living there as well? I'm really quite pleased that Vanessa lives in the house and that she allocates to others as well, and it looks as though she applies the same standards to her room and her living quarters as to all the others. So normally we have absentee HMO landlords, but in this case, and is it that normally the case that applicants live in the same house that is their HMO?
Just based on the ones that we've dealt with in my team, it is, yes, this is the first time I'm aware that the applicant is a live-in landlord, so to speak, for the HMO.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll move to comments. I'll go with Councillor Henry first, then Councillor Crowe.
I just would like to say well done to the applicant and thank you for all what you've been doing, and also good luck, and I will definitely would like to see the application approved.
Thank you. Councillor Crowe.
Yes, if we were to look at the photograph of the back of the house again, and I think we would see that the adjacent building already has a dormer window. And as this application is all about the dormer window, I can't see that there are any grounds for objection.
Yes, thank you for that. Any other comments? Was that Councillor Draper? Yes. Nick.
Going with everybody else, I can't see what we're being asked to object to, which is really, really strange. I'm not exactly sure why this is even here, but thank you very much.
Thank you. If that's all the comments, I'm going to move straight to the vote. The vote is on the officer recommendation to grant planning permission. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I see 8, 9. I think I see 9. Yep, with my non-vote, that's unanimous. 9. None against my non-vote. That's passed. We move to the final agenda of the night. The final planning application of the night. Agenda item 7, which is Fairgreen Parade in Cricket Green Ward. And the, excuse me, officer on this is Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, if I can just take members first to the modification sheet. You'll see that there's some extra explanatory text which has been included and which addresses some of the late submissions which have been made for this proposal. On the screen, you should be able to see an image of Fairgreen Parade as existing. And if I can just toggle between the two, this is an image of Fairgreen Parade as proposed. It's an application for the addition of 2 extra floors on the existing building. If you're familiar with Mitcham Town Centre, please bear with me, but the site is just to the south of the town centre, comprises a mix of commercial uses on the ground floor, including estate agents, betting office, shops, pharmacy, and a number of flats above. It adjoins some rather brutal 1970s buildings which have been built in Mitcham Town Centre, which you can see in images here. It's quite a pleasant building. We believe built in the early 1950s, so very much sort of a late sort of Festival of Britain feel to it. And then you can see in the image on the screen a slightly newer block of flats that was built with a top floor, which is in fact set back slightly from the edge of the building. Again, another photograph of the side of the site, showing the access to the existing flats within the building, and then a rather unattractive entrance to the yard at the back of the site, which you can see in the bottom left of the screen, which takes you into this area at the back of the site. And the proposals would take the new buildings on top of the existing building. If I can take you back to the floor plans for this scheme, we've got the existing units which wrap around the corner. The proposals would form an L-shape configuration of new flats on the additional floors, some of which will have very lofty atrium-like space on the cornermost unit. The proposals, if you look at the committee report, you'll see that there's a mix of residential units from 1, 2 and larger units of accommodation. You'll see from the floor plans that the proposals include the provision of reconfigured parking space at the back of the site, new arrangements for refuse storage, new space designated for cycle storage, which is actually part of the Undercroft area to Eldercrest House. The proposals would retain the gates across the entrance into the site, and you'll see from the committee report that generally speaking we've had positive responses from our design officer. We've had endorsement from the council's transport planner. I think importantly there, the fact that being in a location with a high PTAL or a good PTAL score, it's considered this is a scheme that's appropriate for there not to be parking permits issued and for the scheme to be permit free. If I can take you to the concluding comments in the report, and this picks up in fact on what we were discussing previously, the significance of the national planning policy framework. The scheme delivers on the 3 core elements for delivering sustainable development: economic, social and environmental. Economic in the sense that the new construction activity provides jobs and employment and increases footfall in the town centre, which is good for local business. Social insofar as it delivers new and much needed housing, and environmental insofar as the new construction would be built to higher building regulations standards than were applied at the time of constructing the original building. So we have a low carbon footprint building with a limited need for any reliance on car use. The occupants can use public transport. So officers would assert that the proposals fulfilled the 3 core objectives of providing sustainable development in the NPPF, and the scheme is recommended for approval subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There being no speakers on this one, I'll move straight to questions from members of the committee.
Oh, no.
Councillor Crowe.
Thank you, Chair. To my mind, this application is all about design, and therefore there's an element of personal taste in our discussions now. If one goes back to the original picture showing the frontage, one sees that the new 2 floors appear to have a copper facing, which has weathered a lovely green. Now, I think that looks fabulous. So I'm mindful to approve this, but I'd like to be certain that's what I'm getting. So is it possible to condition this application that's going to look like the photograph? There's probably a better way of expressing that. But what I want to ensure is we actually get the photograph we've been shown. Thank you.
Chair, Councillor Crowe, officers have over the last 12 to 15 months, had to take quite a vigorous approach with developers in and around Mitcham, where complaints have been brought to our attention that the quality of materials that have been used and the finish to buildings really departed or didn't live up to the expectations of the images shown on the drawings. Both myself and one of the senior planners in the team visited a site only the other week on the edge of Mitcham Cricket Green, where there was a very disappointing example of mismatching brickwork. We would certainly wish to ensure, if members had any concerns about this, that we'd want to see proper material samples being provided by the applicant before enabling a scheme like this to go ahead. We acknowledge that it's in a very prominent location. The effect that's arisen with I suppose it's oxidization of the copper sheeting is something that perhaps would only happen over time. So whether or not this is something where an applicant can use a prefabricated material that is coated so as to look like oxidized copper, I would want to be sure of. But I acknowledge your concerns. It is something which the South Area team has found challenging in recent years, and we want to get it right on this scheme.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Alan Breatis.
I want to thank officers for their hard work and thank Jonathan on this. I'm sure that Councillor Crow's issues will be addressed, and yes, as we move further along, we need to get that similarity between what's promised and what's delivered. But I have every confidence that that will be the case. This rather reminds me of Morden Court Parade, and can Jonathan just see if we can compare the two, because we're all very, very pleased with Morden Court Parade, and I just see that kind of working here on Fair Green Parade. Well done, but is there a kind of similarity in work between the two teams?
Well, certainly the chair, Councillor Alan Breatis, the scheme that was put forward by Jan Katian Architects for the refurbishment of Morden Court Parade clearly focused on an Art Deco building that was contemporary with the construction of the tube station and the development of Morden in the late 1920s. As I've said, in this instance, we have a different firm of architects at work. In fact, the architects, which I believe submitted the same application, or submitted the application earlier this evening for the site on the Broadway. So they clearly are a busy practice securing commissions across the borough, and we'd want to work with them to make sure that the details are worked up properly before construction starts on site.
Okay, thank you. I'll move to comments. Do we have any comments from members? I'll take Draper, Christie, Alan Breatis in that order. Nick.
Very quickly, if I'm disappointed that there's no social housing in this. It's a great pity, but as a development, it's lovely. It's really lovely. You probably gathered from that which way I'm going to vote.
Councillor Christie.
Yeah, simply to say it's a very attractive proposal, and provided that the comments from Jonathan in answer to Councillor Crow's question are met, then I very much look forward to this development, and I'll be happy to vote for it.
Councillor Lambritis. Was that who I said?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, it was.
That's three, yes. So I want to thank Jonathan for referring to the three core elements, the economic, the social, and the environmental. The economic, very important for Mitcham. I appreciate the point made by Councillor Draper, but I think we're all going for this. Very important jobs for apprenticeships for the area, new housing sorely needed for the area, and on the environmental higher standards of building regulations, low carbon footprint. Everything is there. We need to vote for this as quickly as possible, David. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, Councillor Henry. Joan.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to say I live in Mitcham for 30 years, and I've been waiting for this day to come when we have something different, something new, and the area looking, you know, fantastic like anywhere else. As Councillor Draper said, the only thing that, sorry that there's no affordable housing there, but of course it's something new and it's something we're looking forward to. Well done to the officers, and, you know, looking forward for it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move to the vote in a second. On the affordable housing, our rules, obviously, in the law stipulates that if you build 10 or more, then we can enforce affordable housing, and this is exactly 9. I don't think that's a coincidence, but it is what it is. I'll move to the vote. All those in favour of the application? Other than me, I'm seeing that as unanimous. So 9-0-1. That one is passed. So finally on the agenda, 2 reports: planning appeal decisions and planning enforcement. Just a note, are they noted by the committee? Thank you to Councillor Dean.
Yeah, so there's one thing that seems to, on the papers that I've got, 54 New Close isn't on there. I brought it up 2 meetings ago because the application was rejected, but residents in New Close have contacted me more than once to say that building continues, and they've had a meeting with the builder who says that the applications have not been rejected, and clearly the paperwork I saw in the past said it has been. So I'm wondering if officers can enforce on that, because everything that he applied for is going ahead, even though the council disagrees with him. So that's 54 New Close, Mitcham on Phipsbridge Estate.
I'm going to assume an officer has just taken note of that.
Yep.
And we will communicate with Councillor Dean and copy me in as well on the response to that. Okay. That being that, thank you to the members of the committee for attending. Thank you for all officers for, I'm sure you get time in lieu back, but for giving up your evening for the planning committee